frost, perhaps even some patches of fog first thing tomorrow, but the most hazardous weather will be the heavy rain and those strong blustery winds across western parts initially. Heaviest rain over the higher ground, especially the hills and mountains of North Wales, and that rain then continues its way eastwards, and there will be some heavier bursts, but it does break up and ease a little bit, with some drier interludes developing for a time. Some strong blustery winds to watch out for, taking the edge of those temperatures, though they will be a touch higher than they have been recently. More wet weather to come as we go into Wednesday. A band of rain pushing its way southeastwards across Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England too. To the south of this, staying pretty cloudy, brighter further north over much of Scotland, but blustery, strong winds, risk of gales or even severe gales towards the northwest. More wet and windy weather to come as we go through the end of the week, particularly towards the northwest, but rather mild.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 PM on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
From 10 AM every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debate, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 PM, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 PM, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Do we have two-tier policing? Because given the way those demonstrations on Saturday were policed, I'm really worried that we're pandering to, frankly, those that back terrorism. And today, big day. Politically, Lee Anderson leaves the Conservatives and joins Reform. GB News' Chris Hope joins me. I'm going to ask, does that mean the red wall has now all but gone? And the most extraordinary controversy over the Princess Kate photographs of her on Mother's Day with her kids, accusations they were doctored. I'm not sure what to make of it. Tom Bauer maybe knows the answer. But before all that, let's get the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Lee Anderson says he would still have defected to the Reform UK party, even if he hadn't been suspended from the Conservatives. He became the party's first MP this morning after he lost the Tory whip for claiming that Islamists had got control of the Mayor of London. As recently as January, Mr Anderson said it was not a proper political party. He now says Reform will allow him to speak out on behalf of millions. Party leader Richard Tice says Reform would aim to build a red wall in traditionally Conservative constituencies.
I'm excited to announce that I have found that champion of the red wall for Reform UK. He's also, coincidentally, going to be Reform UK's first Member of Parliament in the House of Commons. He is, of course, a person of great integrity, no nonsense, and is the Member of Parliament in the county of Nottinghamshire for Ashfield. Please welcome Mr Lee Anderson.
In other news, the government has pledged over £117 million to safeguard mosques, Muslim schools and community centres over the next 4 years. The funding, unveiled today, follows the Prime Minister's promise to allocate more than £70 million to protect Jewish community sites. The government condemned a recent rise in reported anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish hatred. Ministers say they expect the police to fully investigate all hate crimes. Donald Trump will not give any money to Ukraine if he wins the election in November. That's according to the Hungarian Prime Minister. Viktor Orban met his longtime ally in Florida on Friday. He said the former president's claim that the war would end within 24 hours of his re-election is true because he said it was clear Ukraine couldn't win without US support. Leaders across the European Union are concerned, though, that a Trump presidency could lead to an escalation in the conflict. The Princess of Wales has apologised for an altered family photo released by Kensington Palace. Posting to social media, she admitted that, like many amateur photographers, she occasionally experiments with editing, adding she was sorry for any confusion it caused. The Mother's Day image taken by the Prince of Wales was withdrawn by various global photo agencies after a suspicious number of edits may have been made. And the Queen has joined the Prince of Wales at Westminster Abbey for today's Commonwealth Day service. They're among the senior royals who've been gathering for this year's event, which draws on the theme of resilience against a backdrop of health worries in the family. Though he misses today's service, the King reaffirmed his commitment to the 56 member countries.
As I've said before, the Commonwealth is like the wiring of a house, and its people, our energy and our ideas are the current that runs through those wires. Together and individually, we are strengthened by sharing perspectives and experiences. My belief in our shared endeavours and in the potential of our people remains as sure and strong as it has ever been.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Nigel.
Another Saturday and yet another march in central London. Huge numbers of people once again turning out. Extraordinary that we've had all this talk over the course of the last few days. Michael Gove keen to appoint a new czar to deal with Islamophobia, because that, it seems to be the major problem as far as the government's concerned. Much talk about prejudice against Muslims, and yet almost no talk in Westminster about prejudice going the other way. I met people over the weekend saying, well, if they want to protect the Muslim community, what about us? Who is going to protect us? Well, from that we get precious little. Just one of the chants that was available for those who care to listen on the London streets this week was one about Yemen. Just watch these scenes.
Guys, you know what that reference is? The Yemen reference.
I'm listening to my earpiece, sorry.
the Yemen reference, what that is to the Houthis, prescribed terror organisation?
I'm listening to my earpiece, sorry.
You didn't hear anything? They're still doing it now. No?
It's all being recorded by the police monitor.
Oh, OK. Well, thanks for your help.
Well, perfectly clear what was happening there. There we had the mob in the street, effectively supporting the Houthis, an organisation who are a terrorist organisation prescribed in America, not yet here, for reasons I don't quite understand. And they're saying, please turn more ships around. That means send more rockets, send more missiles, kill more merchant seamen. And yet old Bill just cock a deafen, as if to say, nothing to do with us, Governor, it's all too difficult. But now put the boot on the other foot and have a look at the case of Nayak Ghorban. Now, he is an Iranian dissident, very against the Islamist regime that has been there for the last 40 years. And he was out on the London streets holding up a sign. Yes, I accept that it may well have been provocative to many of the marchers, but the sign simply said Hamas are terrorists. And yes, they are, because they are prescribed by the British government. They are recognised as a terrorist organisation. And yet, for his trouble of standing up with a sign saying something that was actually factually correct, he found himself, well, of course, to begin with, abused by many of the marchers, but he knew he'd get that, but then pounced upon by up to half a dozen police officers. Up to half a dozen police officers wrestled him to the ground, and he was arrested. Yep, arrested for holding up a sign that told the truth. And some of these scenes are really quite extraordinary. In fact, I find it hard to believe this is even happening in a country that is our own. But that is what is going on. Yes, it was provocative. I accept that. I get that. But for the police to ignore chants encouraging the Houthis to send missiles against merchant vessels, and this guy gets literally pushed to the ground by the police and arrested. Now, he was later on de-arrested. Now, in mitigation, there was a post put up on X, formerly Twitter, a community posting which said, a video has been posted alleging officers arrested a man for having an anti-Hamas placard. This isn't accurate. He was arrested after an altercation was ongoing and officers intervened to prevent a breach of the peace. He was arrested for assault. Well, one man against 200,000, maybe he was. Officers then fully reviewed the footage and he was later de-arrested. The arrest was not made in relation to the placard. Well, you can believe what you want to believe. But have a look, have a listen to this interview that was done by an undercover journalist with Ghorban shortly afterwards.
Why have you been arrested?
Because I'm writing down Hamas is terrorist organization. That's it. That's it.
What did it say on your sign? What did it say on your sign?
Hamas is terrorist. Hamas is terrorist. UK law. UK put the Hamas terrorist organization on March 2001, and they arrested me because of that. That's it.
They've arrested you because of the sign?
Exactly.
Well, I've given you all sides of the argument there, including a community note. But let me ask you, do you think we now have two-tier policing in this country? Because you know what? I do. And with every week that goes by, I fear it gets worse. Do we have two-tier policing? Your thoughts, please, to farage@gbnews.com. Well, I'm joined by Chris Phillips, former Detective Chief Inspector of the Metropolitan Police and Head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, I am the least anti-police person you could ever meet. And you know that. We've known each other for years. I want the police to do their job and do it well. How can I look at these events from last Saturday, at what has been going on ever since October the 7th, when this began, and not think that the Met have twisted priorities?
It's a very interesting one, Nigel, and what I'd say is I think you need to look at, just talking about this weekend, the two instances separate. First, you have probably officers that should have done much more than they did to deal with the chants that were ongoing, and I'm surprised they didn't, because I think there's a need to deal more with those.
They cocked a deafen, you saw it.
Yeah, and I agree that there's been too much of that, and I think, listen, the legislation is in place and they should be dealing with it. It's not easy, though, to go into crowds and arrest people. Let's be quite honest.
No.
I've dealt with many crowds. I've been in public order situations over the years. But just let me deal with the other incident. This gentleman, it was a complete social media stitch-up. He's got his friend photographing him, taking the video. He stands in the middle of a crowd with a placard that he knows will cause some offence, and the police won't have seen what the camera person was looking, because I think the police were behind him. They stepped in to deal with the breach of the peace and an assault.
So the truth causes offence?
No. You're right, it shouldn't do, but let me give you an example that is probably similar. And I've seen this many times. A Chelsea supporter makes his way into the Tottenham end and starts shouting he's a Chelsea fan. Who gets arrested? It's not the 5,000 Tottenham fans that are standing there. It's the Chelsea fan that has to be taken out and dealt with. You know, if you put yourself in a position where you're going to cause a breach of peace. Now, I know that wasn't, an inflammatory statement. It shouldn't be. But, of course, if you put yourself into the position where you are going to cause some harm and you're going to cause a disorderly situation, the police's job as peace officers is to go in to remove that person out. Now, they arrested him for assault or breach of the peace or whatever, reviewed the cameras, and he was released. And I think...
Funny that.
Yeah, I mean...
Look,
but I think it was a deliberate stitch-up.
Chris, OK.
How do you get famous, Nigel? You get famous by putting yourself on the social media these days.
Well, what would I know about that?
All the stations will come in and watch it, won't they?
I said twice in my talking that it was a deliberate, willful, provocative act. And I accept that.
With his cameraman standing right opposite.
I get all of that. And it's very tough for the police. They didn't need to arrest him, did they?
Well, yes. I mean, you do need to arrest people to take them out of the dangerous situation to some extent.
Well, don't you just have a word with them as they come with me?
It never works like that. Let me tell you, in public order situations, never works like that. But yes, listen, it's very difficult policing public order situations. I think they were right to take him out because there would have been a breach of the peace, I'm sure, over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. He was deliberately doing that to get himself attention, get himself fame on programmes like this, and he's managed to do that. And I think we need to just give the police a little bit of a leeway here. Public order is not easy. Well, and when you're dealing with thousands of people...
No, I get that. And the police are outnumbered and clearly they're scared.
I think they are, and I think we have got... Listen, I think over the last couple of years, there has been a lack of real positive policing. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think, one, police these days are very young in service. We've got the vast majority, because of Theresa May's and David Cameron's work, have managed to...
So the experienced people have all gone.
Experience have all gone. We've got a load of young police officers out there, and they're quite scared to use the powers. And they're scared to use their powers because they fear what's going to happen to them if they do use them. Because the same social media will be getting these police officers suspended and taking the police officers to court. And we've got officers now waiting to go to court because of things that they've tried to use their powers for.
I take your argument, Chris Phillips. I take your argument that it was a deliberately willful, provocative act, even though it was lawful. All right, let me accept that. However, you mentioned the police should have done more about the chants on Houthi missiles. What I cannot believe is a couple of Wednesdays back, 3 Wednesdays back, we had projected onto the Elizabeth Tower, beneath Big Ben, from the river to the sea, a willful,
outrageous,
genocidal, not a single arrest.
Yeah.
Not one single arrest. Where the hell is Samart Rowley and the Met in this?
Well, I totally agree, and I think there's a risk-averse culture within the Met now, right from the middle ranking, higher ranking, but also at the base level, where officers are really scared to use their powers at the risk of being called a racist, quite simply. And I think we've seen the same in the schools. You know, we've still got a teacher in Batley who's in hiding because of actually doing his job properly. And there is definitely an issue throughout our society, and that's permeated into policing.
Who runs the Met? Is it Samart Rowley or is it Sadiq Khan?
I think it's absolutely Samart Rowley. But, of course, he works for Mayor Khan, and it's as simple as that. And it's a very difficult call. I mean, for hundreds of years now, we've had police officers, constables, able to make their own decisions. If I was a constable on the streets and I saw that incident taking place in front of me, I hadn't seen the sign because I was behind them, I would have probably made the same decision as the officers did over the weekend. But that doesn't mean to say, in the cold light of day, when you look at all the evidence and look at what's happened, that was actually the right decision. But let's cut some slack to the police officers who've got to make very quick decisions. And I think many mistakes have been made, particularly in the policing of these demonstrations. But I think Saturday was a deliberate effort to wind up the police and get some fame for that person. And he's managed to do it.
Chris Phillips, as ever, I respect your point of view. I understand your point about Mr. Gorban, but I don't get your point fully about why we just allow pro-terrorist slogans to be chanted on Britain's streets. As ever, thank you for coming on the programme. In a moment, well, a big political moment. The former Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, joins Reform. I'll be joined in a moment by Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor. He will tell us all, and I will not say anything. I won't even dare comment. Otherwise, Ofcom will be given more ammunition to close down this programme.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Mail on Sunday, and the University of Buckingham is calling out wokery at the University of Cambridge. So I guess the culture wars must be almost over then, Josh.
Almost, yeah. Cambridge University discriminating against rich, white, privileged, privately educated men, claims...
The worst kind.
Is, basically me. Claims Vice-Chancellor of rival institution, which is launching a degree course on the rise of woke culture. Now, I 100% agree with this. I applied to get into Cambridge, and I didn't get in because I was too thick.
Oh, wow, so it wasn't the DEI mafia?
No, unfortunately, it was pre-DEI. So it's like a double insult now.
Were you one of those guys who was like had a B average? You know, you look like you should be an A because you act like an A.
I act like an A.
You act
I've
like
got
an
glasses.
A. Yeah,
they're fake. I don't even have to. They don't even have lenses.
Lewis, do you think that this is a little bit cynical? Because I looked up this University of Buckingham, and they opened in 1973, and their tagline on the internet is "the home of the two-year degree." They're trying to bring down Cambridge University with this.
Well, why not pick the biggest? I mean, that's why we should. We should be attacking the BBC 24/7 on this thing.
I thought we were.
We aren't. We don't mention it enough.
Listen.
What I found shocking about this story is Buckingham is the country's oldest private university, and was founded in 1976. Something is wrong there. What do you think? Was Oxford founded by the government? I don't think it was. Was Cambridge?
No, absolutely not. I looked up Cambridge was 1209.
Yes, exactly.
So you can
it
get...
wasn't a government
But this
grant.
is actually quite scary. They can do a course on the origins of the woke movement. I'm just saying, someone's going to have a degree, and our job is going to be under threat. They're going to know much more than us.
Never.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He was a miner. He was a Labour activist and supporter. He was even an agent for a Labour MP up in his home constituency in North Nottinghamshire. But then Lee Anderson became a Conservative in 2019, and he's been pretty high profile. In fact, he was even promoted, pushed up in the Conservative Party. But he's gone now. He, of course, lost the whip over being very critical of Sadiq Khan and perhaps using language that wasn't as polite as maybe it should have been. But today he's joined Reform UK, and the press has gone absolutely potty over it. It is, I think, a huge story. And, of course, I can't comment. I'm only the honorary president of Reform. But given that Ofcom have tried to classify me, reclassify me as a politician, they'd love to take me off air. So I'm going to be really careful and cautious about this. By the way, Ofcom, I'm a celebrity to get me out of here happy as an ex-politician and a broadcaster, but that fight we'll have for another day. So Christopher Hope, GB News' political editor, take it away. What was the significance of Lee Anderson's move today?
Evening, Nigel. It's big, I think, because Lee Anderson was the red wall made flesh, to quote your friend Nick Robinson from the BBC. I mean, he says he was seen by many in the Tory party, certainly amongst those grassroots in the South, as who are these northern cousins who voted for us suddenly in 2019. And Lee Anderson, to be fair to him, he put the hours in. He basically went around all of those seats, speaking up front on the rubber chicken circuit, speaking to them, saying, look, you know, we are in the north too. Well, north is not where it's in Midlands, really, but we support the policy of the Tory party like you do, and here I am. And that's why I think it's almost a severing of that connection to the north, I think, and the red wall seats that Lee Anderson represented. The Tories would deny that. They would say, well, this guy hasn't been Tory MP for 2 weeks, lost a whip over saying that Sadiq Khan was controlled by Islamists, extremists and the rest of it. And he said it was clumsy language, but he wouldn't apologise. Jeremy Hunt and James Cleverly both said apologise. He refused to, and we are where we are. But I think it's a real moment, I think, and there could be more following him. There are rumours in Parliament of 9 other Tory MPs could follow him to Reform. That's quite a toppy number, I think. But even so, if others follow him, you start getting a kind of momentum behind this idea that the Tories aren't right-wing enough.
And that comes up, well, about right-wing, I mean, you know, I'm not sure right and left mean much anymore, but the sort of things Lee talks about is connecting with working-class voters,
I want my country back, he said, didn't he? That was a rallying cry.
A slogan that I've heard before.
Yeah, he just gave it,
Yeah, I want my country back. It was very, very strong. Whether 9 others go or not, I mean, Lee, Richard Tice is saying he's the red wall champion with a plan to tour Lee around the northern constituencies. It could be quite a roadshow, couldn't it?
He would connect with that. So you've got Boris Johnson, of course, who managed to, a rather amazing politician who united those two, the southern and northern branches of the Tory party. With all due respect to Richard Tice, I think he hasn't got that in the north. I think he's seen as a bit more, but he's happy amongst the south, where maybe his base is. Lee Anderson gives the party the extra person who can tour around that northern red wall, cause Labour some problems as much as the Tories possibly in some seats. He said today he will fight 630 seats in the election, won't stand down like the Brexit Party did back in the day, Nigel, and that was obviously painful for you and your friends. You had to stand down. That will not happen. So right now the talk, all the MPs have been out tonight with Rishi Sunak. He's been at the 1922 spring reception. They're all looking at each other, who's next, who might go next, and some have been walking up to me in the Commons. I've come straight from there now, made notes on my order paper here, denying they're jumping. They're calling Lee Anderson this kamikaze approach towards politics. But I've got some names on my piece of paper here. I won't show listeners, and not fair to the MPs themselves, but there are names being circulated about who might be next.
Defection watch.
Defection watch. But I will keep those to myself.
Do you think in number 10 tonight they're saying, well, Lee Anderson, bit of a loudmouth, bit of a maverick, actually he's not going to do us any harm, or are they really worried?
They will be. Certainly in the South, I think in the South, some southern Tories will go, well, we told you so. They weren't really Tories. They were Brexiteers, but not Tories, and they've gone back to really where they should be, which is almost a swing seat. They're not sure where they're going to stand. So I think if that's a problem, because that means they're retrenching to where the Tory party are.
So that would be a blue wall strategy.
Yeah, exactly. And
so we surrender the red wall.
Someone in the blue wall in the Southwest told me exactly that tonight. They think, well, my members are thinking, off you go, Lee Anderson. You weren't really one of us anyway.
Yeah. Do you know what I think? I think they're snobby.
Yeah.
I think they're middle class, middle upper class. He's a working class lad who worked down the pit.
Some people are, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you get your own MP, that's fine. But the problem is that's not a unifying strategy for the whole country. That's the problem.
I think the biggest problem is not just with Lee Anderson and the Tories, but the whole of London is snobby, I think, about opinions outside of it. And maybe Lee represents that. It's going to be absolutely fascinating, Christopher Hope. as ever. Thank you. There we are. No comment from me at all. Ofcom, are you watching? Now, a really interesting moment. Sir Keir Starmer, who can't define what a woman is, and when he's asked by Nick Ferrari whether a woman can have a penis, I'm sorry, I know it's before the watershed, but this is what is going on in our country, can't answer the question. And now it appears a rather big shift, because he now backs a ban on transgender athletes in female competition. I mean, why we're even having this debate is totally and utterly beyond me, but we have been for some time, and we've seen swimming champions that were men turned women, and many other sports, cycling, etc. Well, one person who put her head over the parapet on this some time ago and has taken a shed load of abuse is, of course, Sharron Davies, former Olympic swimmer for Great Britain. And Sharron joins me down the line live right now. Sharron, I mean, you were very early on this. And I know you were called terrible things by a lot of people. You were bigoted, you were this, you were that. Do you begin to feel that maybe the pendulum is swinging back towards common sense and fairness for female athletes?
Yeah, you're right. So the IC changed the rule in 2015. So I've been talking about this since 2015. And the reason I talk about it so much is that East German era that I was involved with, you know, where those young girls were given huge amounts of testosterone, put through a form of male puberty, and then totally dominated women's sport for 20 years. And nothing was done. So I saw so many of my friends lose out. And I just did not want to see another generation of young girls lose out, because exactly the same thing was going to happen, but even worse, because this wasn't just East Germans. This was going to be across the whole world and across every single sport. And we've now got about 900 trans-identifying men that we know. We've got 50 in the FA just here in England. And in fact, just this last couple of weeks, we've had the FA not standing up for a league of 6,000 young girls up in Yorkshire, where the parents of a trans-identifying young boy says he wants to play football with the girls. The parents and the girls have said, no, we want to keep this you know, as a girls' sport, please, for safety and for fairness. And the FA have said, we're going to close you down. So one boy outranks 6,000 girls who want to play fair sport. And this is how ridiculous this has become. I have to say, it's good news to hear what Keir has to say today. I'm not holding my breath, if I'm really honest, because there's a lot of this that goes on. And first and foremost, he needs to be able to identify what a woman is. You know, we can't protect women if we can't define them. And at the moment, the Equality Act has been on purposely made grey. So the first thing we need to do is to clarify that. And when we use the word sex, we mean biological sex. And we need to be able to defend sex discrimination in this country. And at the moment, it's very difficult to do that.
And this is biological sex through puberty, isn't it? Isn't that the key point?
Well, it's biological sex, full stop. So humans can't change sex. It's absolutely impossible to do that, you know. And this word intersex, which is an old-fashioned word, really it's DSD, differences of sexual development. Even people with differences of sexual development who are an absolutely minuscule part of society, they're still male or female. And they still cannot change sex. So, you know, it doesn't matter what hormones you take, how much testosterone you suppress, what surgery you take, you will still be male or female. That's biological. And in fact, things like Q angle, which is the shape of your hips to your knees, it's irrelevant. That will stay the same, you know. And for women, it's much wider, because obviously we're childbearing. And something like football, 6 times as many ACL knee injuries for females compared to males because of our anatomy. So it's just, you know, and also you have to remember, there's only 1,000 women in the UK that earn their living from sport. There's 11,000 men. And 2% of the sponsorship dollar goes to women compared to 98% goes to men. So we already have this really tiny piece of the cake anyway, you know, which we're working on trying to grow. And this will not help it by turning around and saying that, you know, we value the feelings of males more than we value the reality of people that are biologically female.
Sharron, I'm not even going to bother to try and challenge you on any of that. It all makes absolute sense. And I bet there are people watching and listening to this now who are saying, blooming good on you, Sharron Davies. You put your head over the parapet even before the Brexit referendum, and you've never stopped campaigning. You're beginning to win, but you're only just beginning to win. And well done you. Thank you for joining me here on GB News. I sense that Sharron's got a lot more work to do, but the mood music is changing. The pendulum is beginning to swing. In a moment, we will look at real anger in Kent about buildings being repurposed for asylum seekers without any consultation with anybody whatsoever. Plus, a look at the Irish referendum. You haven't heard about it? You will in just a moment. The government got a real whopping.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Eastern parts may have a touch of frost tonight, but further west it is going to turn wet and windy due to an area of low pressure and associated fronts that are pushing their way in from the Atlantic. We do also have an occluded front affecting parts of northwest Scotland tonight. That will bring some outbreaks of rain for a time, but it's across Northern Ireland where we're going to have the heavy rain and strong winds pushing in, and that rain will later reach far western parts of Scotland, England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. In the east, where we see some drier and perhaps even clearer weather, could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog first thing tomorrow, but the most hazardous weather will be the heavy rain and those strong blustery winds across western parts initially, heaviest rain over the higher ground, especially the hills and mountains of North Wales, and that rain then continues its way eastwards, and there will be some heavier bursts, but it does break up and ease a little bit, with some drier interludes developing for a time. Some strong blustery winds to watch out for, taking the edge of those temperatures, though they will be a touch higher than they have been recently. More wet weather to come as we go into Wednesday, a band of rain pushing its way southeastwards across Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England too. To the south of this, staying pretty cloudy, brighter further north over much of Scotland, but blustery, strong winds, risk of gales or even severe gales towards the northwest. More wet and windy weather to come as we go through the end of the week, particularly towards the northwest, but rather mild.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I asked you, do we have two-tier policing? Some of your comments that have come in. Mike says, at every pro-Palestinian march, we see two-tier policing. The police attack and arrest a man decrying Hamas, and the destruction of his banner was shocking. Susan says, the police are working against the majority of law-abiding citizens. Something very frightening is going on. Do you know what, Susan? Just over the weekend, just meeting people in the street, out shopping, going to the petrol station, people are genuinely fearful for what is going on. Another viewer says, yes, we do have two-tier policing and it's wrong. And finally, Robbie says, I believe there has been two-tier policing for a long time. Look how many police were surrounding the man who had the placard. Meanwhile, criminals walk free. There is so much anger on this. But Chris Phillips made the point that the guy with the placard, with the camera, he was kind of being provocative and looking for trouble. But the overreaction was truly astonishing. Now, the frontline county in the war against illegal immigration is, of course, Kent, because that's where the boats land. And social services in Kent have been lumbered again and again with huge numbers of young people to look after. But Charlie Peters, GB News reporter, has something here, I think, as a story that is going to make people in Kent absolutely furious.
That's right, Nigel. In July, Kent lost a High Court battle along with the Home Office, which said that they were unable to house unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in the hotels. They deemed that unlawful. So as a consequence, they were forced to move to find new premises to house asylum-seeking children throughout the county. So they quite covertly went about identifying 9 sites to use. They've picked up 2 already. We don't know where they are. But from local viewers of GB News in Kent, we've learnt that one site in Dartford called the Limes, they started repurposing it in October without consulting the local community. Serious works went on for a couple of months before it was revealed that this site was being used for such a purpose. We've also uncovered today that that site has a covenant placed upon it, a restricted covenant from 1964 between the NHS and Kent County Council, ruling that they can only use that premises as an old person's home. However, they've gone against that with this repurposing in order to develop it for a new purpose for the asylum-seeking children. Now, this, of course, has been an extremely contentious issue for the government for some time now. 118,000 people have crossed in the small boats since this started, many more in lorries, of course, as well, which often isn't included in that stat, and we mustn't forget that. And at the same time, some 7,000 people under 18 have made that crossing from July 2021 to December of last year.
Well, at least claiming to be.
Yes, indeed, and that is a big part of the problem. Some of the information I've received from the Home Office today is saying that they have robust checks in place, but they can't, guarantee this process. And as we've discussed this story on the channel today, many viewers have gotten in touch with their own experiences. A lot of foster carers watch this channel, and they've said, as this process has gone up and the state has really struggled to deal with the number of children claiming asylum over the last few years, they've been left in cases where they're convinced that they actually had adults in their homes. This is all, of course, extremely precarious, and for the local community not to be told what's going on in the area, what this significant building is being repurposed for, that's generated a lot of concern. At the same time, Kent not saying where those other locations are is also adding fuel to that fire. Kent is saying they're doing that for safeguarding reasons. They want to protect the children they're looking after. As you'll know, some 158 children are still missing after it was revealed last year that many children have been picked up from these hotels. But we also have learnt that this current location in Dartford, children are allowed to leave unsupervised. There's a 10 p.m. curfew, 24/7 security. But if the gangs can target them at hotels, there's no reason to suggest the same won't go on again.
No, absolutely. Charlie Peters, thank you. Now, Adam Cherry was out today with Amnesty International, who held a protest outside Parliament. They hired a Rishi Sunak lookalike to play the Wheel of Misfortune over the Rwanda bill, which basically had all the problems they had with the policy. Adam saw this earlier on today. These people never, ever give up.
Government and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, should stop playing political games, dystopian horror games with people's lives, with the rule of law and with human rights. So the right to asylum is something that anybody has a right to if they are under the circumstances where they have to flee persecution, conflict, war, whatever it might be. That right is universal. It's for anybody. It would happen to you and I if in that situation happened in the UK, and that right needs to be respected. And at the moment, the UK government is not respecting the right to asylum. It's trying to undermine that right. There's a failed policy, there's an immoral policy, a reckless policy, which is not allowing people to make those claims in the UK, and it's got to stop.
Never let it be said that GB News does not give you both sides of the argument, because we do. Now, a referendum took place in Ireland a couple of days ago. It's had very little coverage in the UK, but the government got the most enormous walloping. Gary Murphy, author and professor of politics at Dublin City University, joins me. Gary, we've seen almost nothing in British media about this. In short, there were 2 questions posed by the government, both questions, I guess, that would have been seen as socially progressive, but the Irish have said no. What's happened here?
Yes, Nigel, Article 41 of the Irish Constitution is to do with the family, and there was 2 referendums, one on what we call the family bill and one on care, and the government, to quote Leo Varadkar, or Taoiseach, got a big wallop from the electorate who voted. the definition of the family to say the family and other durable relationships. And secondly was on care, was basically the idea of removing the word woman from the Constitution and replacing it with a more substantive carers clause. And both were decisively rejected, one by 2/3 and one by 74%, the largest in the history of the Irish state. So a pretty terrible day, really, for the government, Nigel.
Yeah, because, I mean, looking at it, Gary, over the last few years, the government have put many referendum questions to the Irish people. The government nearly always carry the day. A couple of hiccups with the European stuff, but that's going back a long time. Why now? What is this mood of rebellion that seems to be brewing in Ireland?
Yeah, I think there's two things. As you said, we had a very successful, the government had a very successful referendum on same-sex marriage, which was carried by 2/3 in 2015. And we repealed our abortion legislation, very restrictive legislation, in 2018, again on a 2-to-1 vote. And these are complex results. I think there is certainly a large element of social progressives who didn't think the government went far enough. And there is still a very significant a conservative view in the Irish in the Irish populace that removing the word mother in particular from the Constitution was something they weren't willing to do. Now, I think, as you will know more than anyone, referendums are won by campaigning, and the yes vote campaign was pretty abysmal, to be perfectly frank. The government parties were half-hearted at best. The interesting thing was all the opposition parties also supported this referendum, but it was such a weak campaign. I mean, and all the...
I've lost Gary, but I tell you what, that rebellion is in the air. It was in the air in Portugal yesterday, in a general election, in the air over the weekend with the Irish referendum. The European elections coming up in the first week of June this year are going to be really, really interesting. Now, a royal photograph put out on Mother's Day, which was supposed to tell us that Kate is really, really rather well, has now been dropped for being doctored. What on earth does it all mean? I'm very, very confused, but I'm sure royal biographer Tom Bauer will have all the answers for us in just a moment.
On Patrick Christys tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, Lee Anderson has defected from the Tories to Reform. I have a live sit-down interview with the man of the moment. Has he betrayed his fellow Tories? Should he call an immediate by-election? How much has he been paid? The bonkers Princess of Wales Photoshop scandal. Is it time for Kate to tell all? The King's former butler, Grant Harold, has his say. And are we heading towards Islamic blasphemy laws in the UK? Don't miss Patrick Christys tonight, 9 till 11 p.m. Be there.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Should we put tobacco-style warnings on ultra-processed foods? Boris Johnson is calling on the government to do this. In his Daily Mail column, the former Prime Minister says that people don't know what they're feeding their families and there's too many extra ingredients. That's why I'm asking, should we put tobacco-style warnings on ultra-processed food? Well, joining me now to discuss, Steve Miller, former presenter of Fat Families, Helena Davidson, campaigner and policy expert at the Vegan Society. Right, so I'm going to start with you. Steve Miller, what do you think?
Oh, I'm applauding Boris today. Good on you, mate. And the reason for that is we know that the research on the warnings on cigarettes, I should say, when those warnings were visual, they worked very well. The second reason on a practical level is that we need to stop looking and listening before we start, grazing and putting things in the trolley. And the third thing is that these kind of signs, or these warnings, I should say, are kind of hypnotic. They trigger the emotion. So they're much more likely to get people to think and maybe resist.
Yeah, so at the Vegan Society, we're broadly in favour of increasing consumer knowledge when it comes to the nutritional value of people's food. But I think it's important to mention that ultra-processed food isn't an issue that's exclusive to vegans. And whilst most meat alternatives will fall into the ultra-processed food category, it largely depends on how we're going to look at how UPFs are going to be assessed, because vegan alternatives that fall under ultra-processed foods, they're actually, on average, healthier than meat products or ultra-processed foods that contain animal products. Really? So I think it depends on how we look at it. We might have to take a closer look at the nutritional profile of individual foods rather than the level of processing.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs and Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Intense speculation about the health, of course, of the Princess of Wales. Not been seen for a very long time. But yesterday, Mother's Day, a photograph of her with her 3 children, and suddenly it's been withdrawn. Now, I'm joined by Tom Bower, royal biographer on Harry, Meghan, King Charles, and a keen observer of these things. Tom, I cannot remember ever an official photograph being withdrawn and being effectively declared null and void. And this all comes down to the doctoring of the picture. So what were they trying to do here?
Well, there was Kate, unfortunately. Look, this is a woman who's very ill, who's suffered major surgery, needs a long time to recuperate, and is still suffering. And she's under enormous pressure with all this. You've got to show yourself. You've got to be. Where are you? Are you something?
And of course, all the speculation on the internet as to what may be wrong.
Exactly. And what she needed were wise men, both in Kensington Palace, in Buckingham Palace, and Downing Street, to protect her from all this harangue of all these ghouls, all these absolute mischief makers. And they failed her. So they said, look, let's have a photograph. So William takes a photograph. And the problem with William is he doesn't like taking advice at all. And when he does, it's the wrong advice. He, like his father, likes yes men in his entourage. And none of them actually would have dared say, don't let Kate start doctoring the pictures as she likes to do.
So the answer would have been to say to PA or somebody, send one of your photographers in and do a snap.
They're just terrified that they're not in control. And I don't blame them completely, because they're harangued all the time, they're under enormous pressure, so they all the time feel, we want to control everything. But you can't control everything, because you can't anticipate this sort of problem. And so she comes out with this ridiculous thing, well, I like doctoring, I like playing with my Adobe. It doesn't work in the real world. Well, it does ring true because it's so naive. I mean, she's a sick woman. Clearly, she thought, I want the picture to look better.
Tom, when you say she's a sick woman, how sick do we really think she is?
I think she's seriously sick. She'll recover, but she needs time. She needs a gap from the pressure. And that's what's so unfair, that in the end, this is a woman who really embodies the best of British principles. She's a wonderful ambassador for Britain and for the royal family. Yeah. And she just needed a break. And people aren't willing to give her that break, and that's really awful.
So William's judgment is seriously in question here.
Yes, he should have protected her. He should have said no. And her staff, her senior private secretary should have said no. The cabinet secretary should have said no. And Buckingham Palace should have said no. But the trouble is that King Charles is ill, and his private secretary isn't much good either. And so they've led themselves into this ridiculous PR catastrophe, which will blow over. It's not the end of the world. But will they learn a lesson from it? That's the question.
Will they resolve it by now having a photograph taken by somebody else?
I don't think so. I think the best thing is that she's left to recover properly until sometime after Easter. The photograph was lovely. What did it matter if the hand was in the wrong place? But, you know, the agencies have their rules and they're quite right to enforce them. It shouldn't have got that far. That's the problem. What it shows is this is a storm in a teacup. The real problem is something much worse could happen down the line. who's going to make sure, who's going to guard the royal family from making those mistakes much more serious?
No, well, that's obviously very, very important. And also, I mean, you know, we've talked before about the slimmed-down monarchy. Well, there isn't much of it left at the moment, really,
There isn't,
is there?
and that's the problem. And they're constantly under pressure from Meghan and Harry, who are constantly sniping from Montecito. Every week they're looking for a story just to undermine their relations here. And that puts even more pressure on them. And there's no doubt that King Charles, I thought today when he did his Commonwealth address, which was very, very important, he didn't look well at all. You know, the truth is he's not taking natural herbs and things. He's clearly on the real hard stuff.
So are you suggesting, Tom Bower, that our king is rejecting normal medical advice and going for pills and potions?
Pills and potions? No, I don't think he is. I think the whole natural medicine thing, which he's advocated for years, coffee enemas to cure cancer, he's put to the dustbin. He's going for the real medicine now.
You think he is?
I think he is, and that's why he looks so peaky, to say the least. And he tried his hardest today. I think there's a lot of sympathy for him, rightly so. But, you know, he's going through a very tough time too. I mean, he's 75, he's facing mortality too. His wife is clearly tired as well from it all. You know, we make great demands on these people who are not elected. They're born into the job. We welcome the monarchy. We want a monarchy. But at the moment, it's just not going...
They used to share the burden. But, of course, you've got Andrew out of it, Harry disappeared. The Queen, as you say, there are limits to what she can do.
Yeah.
The King ill. Princess Anne in her early 70s. I mean, apart from the Duke of Edinburgh, who was 60 at the weekend, there's almost no one left, is there?
Well, there isn't, and the real problem is it is a crisis. There's no doubt about it, because we're used to seeing the royal family spread across the kingdom every day, and now we're going to have to get used to something far more limited.
And charities particularly rely upon them, don't they?
Charities, but also housing associations, hospitals, local government, the army, the military services, they all rely on the royal family to embody the best of British values. That is a problem now, and that, unfortunately, hasn't been made better by what's happened in the last 24 hours.
So the fiasco, and let's call it a fiasco, because that's what it is.
Yes.
They've got this completely wrong in every way. Will they learn lessons from it?
Only if they change staff. If they can only get wise people back into the palaces who understand. But, I mean, it's a top-down problem. I mean, the problem is King Charles does not take no for an answer. He only wants yes men. Prince William, unfortunately, has followed his father. Otherwise, he also... I mean, he's too headstrong. He wants to create a different monarchy. So that leaves us...
Well, William, not even sure he wants to be the head of the established church.
Well, exactly. I mean, all these things that dribble out, he is a man who thinks he can modernise the monarchy.
Oh, dear.
And, exactly. That is a great problem.
It sounds like an enormous problem, Tom Bower, as ever. Absolutely fascinating. Jacob, I wonder what you made of this extraordinary row over the photograph.
Well, I'd say one thing, and that is that I think the Princess of Wales is marvellous because she's taken the blame. And I bet it wasn't her. And I just think it's noble when a principal takes the blame for something that was probably done by a member of her staff. And I think it shows you the quality of the Princess of Wales. She could easily have dumped that on a minion. And instead she said, it was my fault, I'm very sorry. And I think that shows the quality of the Princess of Wales.
No. Well, she's a much-loved figure. And,
rightly so.
And Tom's making the point that she's obviously really quite unwell and it's going to be a long time before she's back.
I don't know, but I hope she makes a quick recovery. But I did think that was proper nobility, genuinely noble in the right sense for a royal.
Yeah, take the blame. How was today?
Glorious
in the Conservative Party?
In Somerset, the weather was particularly
I was asking
fine.
about Westminster, Jacob.
Well, what a surprise. Well, look, I'm obviously sorry Lee's gone.
Yeah.
I think Lee and I agree on most things. I mean, you and I agree on most things. So we need to get the right back in the same party. It was a mistake to take the whip away from him. And obviously I'll be talking about this in my programme with Richard Tice coming on to talk about it too.
Do you not think that, the words that Anderson used, and he said himself were a bit clumsy, but it's almost like a class prejudice thing, isn't it? It's almost like, here's this working-class bloke who used to be a miner. We sort of tolerate him, but, oh, gosh, he's so common and so awful, we'll take the whip away.
Oh, that's a terrible thought, because actually...
I think it's true.
Lee represented the coalition that Boris put together
I
in
know
2019.
that, but I'm talking about the Conservative Party. They're snobs, aren't they?
I hope not. I mean, they shouldn't be. It's a terrible mistake because we want to win voters. Yeah. And Lee was a sort of poster boy.
No, I know he was.
Conservatism.
Well, I understand what Jacob's saying, folks. Yeah, I feel there's a degree of snobbery. Runs through all of this. Let's have a look at the weather with Alex.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Eastern parts may have a touch of frost tonight, but further west it is going to turn wet and windy due to an area of low pressure and associated fronts that are pushing their way in from the Atlantic. We do also have an occluded front affecting parts of northwest Scotland tonight. That will bring some outbreaks of rain for a time, but it's across Northern Ireland where we're going to have the heavy rain and strong winds pushing in, and that rain will later reach far western parts of Scotland, England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow. In the east, where we see some drier and perhaps even clearer weather, could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog first thing tomorrow, but the most hazardous weather will be the heavy rain and those strong blustery winds across western parts initially, heaviest rain over the higher ground, especially the hills and mountains of North Wales, and that rain then continues its way eastwards, and there will be some heavier bursts, but it does break up and ease a little bit, with some drier interludes developing for a time. Some strong blustery winds to watch out for, taking the edge of those temperatures, though they will be a touch higher than they have been recently. More wet weather to come as we go into Wednesday, a band of rain pushing its way southeastwards across Scotland, Northern Ireland, into northern England too. To the south of this, staying pretty cloudy, brighter further north over much of Scotland, but blustery, strong winds, risk of gales or even severe gales towards the northwest. More wet and windy weather to come as we go through the end of the week, particularly towards the northwest, but rather mild.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
I'm flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GB WIN to 84900.